The Cincinnati Bengals going through what y'all need to know to make some money on this team in 2021. Last year, 4-11-1. Tough first rookie year for Joe Burrow. For sure, obviously, the injury played a big part in that and the continued lack of attention to the offensive line. This team actually had a ton of injuries on both sides of the ball, maybe more than people realize because I don't know that a whole lot of people paid attention to this team. But that can definitely go towards explaining the 4-11-1 record. Now, I'm going to be open and upfront with the Bengals here. If there's any team that I am less than completely confident about my evaluations and stuff, it is this one, and specifically it is in regards to the rookie class of last year. I just did not get to watch as much as I would have liked to about this team. Now, let's be clear, I've still seen a lot. I do know a lot about these players, especially the guys, again, who aren't rookies here. But that is just something I will mention right up front, and that contributes to this. This is, I think, from what I remember, the only team in the AFC that I was below 500 on, and by quite a distance too. So this is kind of the last bad one we're going to be at here. Now you're still 6-8-1 on the ones we're putting on money on. So it's not like you're out here losing a bunch of money or anything like that, but that is something I will mention very clearly, so keep that in mind. But let's talk about this team going forward, because I do feel a lot more confident about that, given the roster that they have. Losses-wise from this team from last year. So you lose Bobby Hart and Alex Redmond. Bobby Hart's horrible. Everybody knew it. Did not perform better when this team decided to bring him in and start after the Giants. Whatever. Alex Redmond, actually a kind of okay player, but are they going to miss him? Not really. Joe Bernard, good running back for a long time. Does he matter? No. Does this team really going to miss him? No, but nice player-ish. Alex Erickson, John Ross, two rotational receivers for this team. John Ross still has a lot of talent, actually a player who in a better offense or better situation, I have no doubt would have done and will do better, but not super relevant here. It wasn't going to be here. Ryan Finley, one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. Defensively, a lot more names and some real good ones actually too. William Jackson III, one of the absolute better corners in the NFL, is gone. You lose Christian Covington, a player who is wildly underrated, a very, very good defensive tackle who started games for this team last year and was notably productive. They're going to miss him. Xavier Williams, also okay guy. Carl Lawson, pretty reasonable edge rusher, not the super high-end talent that maybe he got paid a little bit like, but still a good player. Mckenzie Alexander, again, good player, was hurt all last year, didn't really get to show it here. Josh Bynes, a reasonable veteran linebacker. And Geno Atkins, player, the Bengals are going to miss. He's been a very good player here for a long time now. At his age, he's nowhere near as impactful as he has been before. In fact, he's not really impactful at all, but they are going to miss him just name-wise, But additions to this team, this is where we're really getting into it. So you add Riley Reef, and very important for this team. We'll talk about him later, but definitely worth all the money they threw at him, which wasn't very much. Trent Taylor, a whatever receiver, don't care about that one. Defensively, bunch of guys who could potentially start. Eli Apple and Toby Wuzzier. We'll talk about them later, but both players I actually rather like. Larry Ogunjoby, decent player. Trey Hendrickson, wildly overpaid, but still a reasonable player. And then Ricardo Allen, that one's bad. Ricardo Allen has been very bad for a couple of years. So here's the draft class for the Cincinnati Bengals. With rookies, we'll talk about how good they are once they get onto an NFL field. Until then, I don't want to create expectations. That's part of what happened last year with this team, in fact, was me assuming things about Joe Burrow and about some of their other rookies that didn't really end up being the case. So here it is, though, to look at. A lot of guys in here. Position by position, though. Let's go through this roster and talk about what they have, what they don't have, and what you can expect for 2021. So you see the number in the top right. That's the total number of players at the position, 74 quarterbacks. Number to the right, 19th, Joe Burrow, 19th out of 74 at the quarterback position. So Joe Burrow, again, of all the starting quarterbacks in the NFL, I will 100% raise my hand and say that I am the least confident in my evaluation about him as opposed to everyone else. What I see from him, but I'll still talk because that's the perspective I have. What I see from him so far, and I'm going to review this before the start of the season for sure, is a player who is just kind of okay. I don't know. He did things that worry me that he has in common with other just kind of okay quarterbacks, guys like down in the tier of like a Kirk Cousins or I'm trying to think of other players right around there. Derek Carr, Baker Mayfield, guys like that. Guys who I still like, I think are more than capable of winning you games in the NFL, but not stuff that I'm particularly impressed with or think is at elite level. What are those things? So He threw the ball reasonably quick. He got the ball out into the offense fast enough, for sure. He was able to make first read throws and, again, get them out on time. He had a willingness to throw the ball down the field at times, not to the level of a guy like Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson who are just chucking the ball long. But he did it enough for me to say, okay, that's useful, because that's that's like the second or third most useful thing you can have as an NFL quarterback. I talk about this a lot. It's just the willingness to just throw the ball down the field into one-on-one coverage, because of how often it goes well for the offense in the modern NFL. So he has that, not as much as, again, I maybe like, but whatever. He shows pretty reasonable pocket awareness, actually, even maybe better than that. Grant, he was in a horrible situation with how the Bengals offensive line was, but that didn't necessarily terrify him or anything like that, which was encouraging, and he showed the ability to get back into space once it's taken away from him by the pass rush. So I like a lot of that stuff. Frankly, though, for the negatives, I don't think he was nearly as accurate as he was hyped up to be once he got to the NFL. Frankly, he was not impressive at all in that. He wasn't horrible. He wasn't out here Jameis Winstoning throws, or Mitch Trubisky. But he wasn't like, throwing dots all over the place. He was just kind of okay about it. As a guy who went through full field progressions, again, I don't think he was really good. He was okay. And again, this is with the important caveat of being in the first half of a rookie season behind a horrible offensive line with a bad head coach. So all of that is very important into why I'm not confident with where I am with Joe Burrow. But it's not like he rose above that situation, and there were still things that, even if he was in a better situation, I would be worried about coming up with, like I said, about him maybe taking too long to move on from the first read, or not making the greatest decisions without understanding how defenses are going to move. Now, part of that is rookie stuff, like I just mentioned. He will likely get a lot better, but not something I'm going to guarantee you, because it doesn't always happen like that. So that's Joe Burrow. Again, we'll talk about him more later into the season. Brandon Allen is a backup guy I thought was horrible, but I actually started some games last year and wasn't quite horrible. If he's playing any level of good defense, you're going to suck. But if he's not, he actually does some things as a runner, as a guy who can throw a first read wide open that are whatever. But again, if he's starting games, your team's going to be bad. Then Kyle Shermer, Eric Dungy, two guys, whatever, practice squad guys at running back. So there's only, I talk about this, there's only 8 to 10 running backs who I actually care about in the NFL, who actually matter as opposed to their peers and rise above this big second level guys. Joe Mixon is not one of those guys. He gets kind of close because the dude is an explosive athlete. I will freely admit that. He, at times, will make plays that look like those top elite running backs in terms of making guys completely miss him and allowing himself to explode into space, doing it very quickly, flashing the ability to move behind the line of scrimmage to create more yards for himself. He does all that stuff from time to time, but he does it at such a lower frequency as opposed to the guys ahead of him that I think it legitimately makes a difference, especially when you're talking about, over a season or over the number of carries that Joe Mixon is projected to get in this offense. So that's something to keep in mind. And frankly, for as explosive as he theoretically is on practice, I don't think he's any more, he's not faster than like a Aaron Jones, or he's not quicker than like a Alvin Kamara or something. So he's just kind of good at that stuff. So overall, useful player. If you give him 25 carries in a good offense, he's going to be super productive, whatever, but not somebody who I think makes a difference himself. Backup wise, I actually concerned about them. Samaje Perine should not get carries in the NFL. Problem with him is anytime you're giving him a carry, you're limiting the ability of your offense to be good, because he's not going to be able to take a carry and turn it into 20, 25, 50, whatever yards, unless it was going to happen anyway, in which case, obviously, he's not the one adding value to that situation. And for a bigger, slower running back, it's not like he's this dude who's crushing people at the line of scrimmage or consistently finding ways to gain yards at 1 or 2 yards at the end of his runs. He just kind of runs forward and falls over, whatever. Trevion Williams, rookie last year, 2 years ago, people have been excited about, but a late round pick for a reason, whatever. Not many guys past literally Joe Mixon that I'm thinking even are going to be impactful players. Granted, it's the running back position. At wide receiver. All right, so Bengals fans going to hate me probably for a lot of this time, but I think it's important to be honest about where these players are, because if there's any position I am confident about, as far as this team's valuations. It is this receiver one. Outside of Jamar Chase, he's a rookie. Who knows? He could be absolutely amazing. That would change a whole lot of things for this offense for sure. He could also not be that good, in which case it doesn't change that much for this offense. I think it's safe to say he's going to be pretty good at the very least, but again, I don't necessarily want to assume that. So past him, we'll talk about what he looks like later when we talk about the offense as a whole. But the guys we can actually evaluate. Let's start with T. Higgins. I very much like T. Higgins. That 37th ranking, that might look a little low, but keep in mind there are a ton of really good receivers in the NFL, and I definitely would include him in that number. He is good. He's a guy who's going to get separation in the intermediate level of the field. He is big and long and actually kind of fast for a guy his size. And he's not just limited to being, this plodding outside receiver who only gets jump balls. He can actually do things that modern NFL receivers are required to do to be really good as far as, again, getting open over especially the middle of the field, in that 8 to 20 yard range. He's good there. He's very useful as an after the catch guy. Actually, he's not great, but he can run forward into space and be reasonable there. I think he has pretty damn good hands, or at least he flashed that ability. And overall, very, very useful receiver. Although I will say, I don't know that there's a big ceiling on him. I think his ceiling is about like a Michael Gallup, which that is a compliment. Let's be clear, Michael Gallup is extremely good. But it's not the type of number one receiver who's going to be the reason your offense is consistently successful. Then Tyler Boyd. I am not. So Tyler Boyd is fine. Okay, but I think he is maybe the greatest example in the year 2021 in the NFL of a guy who is overrated because of his statistics. As the slot receiver in the offense that is depended very heavily on the slot receiver to just kind of be open over the middle, he has got fed a ton of targets. And while he's still good and he's still useful, I think it's pretty clear, actually, because of such a large sample size, that he's not a guy who's adding a bunch of value to your offense, right? Because what does he do? Well, he separates, I would say, below average, unless he's, beating up on some garbage slot corner, in which case, okay, yes, I understand when they played the Browns and Tavier Thomas last year, he went off. That was pretty obvious because when you put him against a bad player, he's good enough to do what he does. And when you take, 10 carries and feed a matchup where it's a good versus a bad player, that's the production you're going to get in the NFL, whatever. I'm not going to argue with that. But if he plays players that don't suck, you see him get shut down. You see him just do whatever. You see him get these kind of whatever stat lines of, 6 for 50 or something like that type of shit. He is really that type of player because, again, he doesn't really get open very well. He does have extraordinarily strong hands for the receiver position. I'm not going to say anything about that, but it's more as far as turning around, catching a curl with a corner tackling him as opposed to mossing dudes down the field, which is not the same skill set. He's not a very good athlete, again, as opposed to the rest of the receivers in the NFL. Not bad, but he's not a guy who's going to get the ball in his hands and then make a bunch of guys miss and create yards. He's going to catch the ball, try to fall forward. He does that stuff. Now, he does it very well. He's absolutely a useful player. Again, I feel it's important to clarify this. But he does run into the issue, which is the whole reason I'm talking about this, if he's not going to be a reason your offense is successful. He's just going to help good players be successful, which is an important distinction, especially on a team where I am concerned about them having a player who's going to make them be successful. Backup-wise, not excited, but Auden Tate, crazy contested catch highlights, but horrible as far as getting open, which really limits your ability to be useful in the NFL. Mike Thomas, he works hard. He's a special teams player. If he's asked to run, these simple route combinations and he's going to be open anyway, yeah, he's good enough to get open, but doesn't really do anything otherwise. Trent Taylor, player the 49ers hyped up for years, but when he's on the field, I don't know. He's okay, but he actually just reminds me of a really, really, really bad version of Tyler Boyd in terms of if he's supposed to be open from the slot, he'll get open, but he ain't going to do nothing else. So, those guys all, if you force one of them onto the field, I'm not terrified for your offense, but not really adding anything. At tight end, you get CJ Uzomah back, which I actually think is rather important for them. He tore his ACL at the beginning of last year, and they kind of did miss him. He's a reasonable player. He's not bad. He's not good. I think he actually also falls into the trap, as a lot of these players do, I keep talking about, of if he's like the weak link on your offense, you're doing fine, and he's going to do the things you need him to do. But if you ask him to do more than that, you're just going to get really inefficient results. And so he's not going to get open, really. He's not going to be like an explosive player or someone who adds to your offense as an after the catch guy, any of that stuff. But if he's, running like a flag route and the defender misses him or is late to react to him or whatever, he's going to be big and fast enough to be open. His hands are just fine. And he'll run routes and do fine for you. But no more than that. As a blocker too, he's actually okay. Again, he's, despite his 47th ranking, he's not somebody I'm like terrified to start, but you need pieces around him. And then Drew Sample's bad. I don't know I think Bengals fans know that. He was like a second round pick a couple years ago. Why? I have no clue. He fits into this really big kind of third category of tight ends. So there's these, the really good guys at the top, and there's a bunch of tight ends kind of similar to running backs that are all basically the same. They're going to run their CJ Uzama's in that category. They're going to run their routes. If they're open, they're open. If like they're supposed to block, they're going to block. Okay. They're really a lot of guys who are simple or similar. Drew Sample is like that, but isn't actually good at that stuff. Like he's big and strong, but that strength doesn't really show through as a blocker, and he definitely doesn't show as a receiver. He's not someone who's like physical throughout his routes. He's just kind of out there running for cardio, and he's not going to get open if he's covered generally at all. He's not really going to make plays as a receiver. Outside of occasionally, he has like 6'6" or something like that. There's going to be a time when a DB is just too small, but it's not something that's a frequently useful skill set. Then you have Thaddeus Moss and whatever. He hasn't actually played NFL snaps that I care about, so I'm not going to make a judgment on him, but he is a name. And also Cheyenne O'Grady, a player that people were kind of excited about it because I'm pretty sure he's a very good athlete from the position, but not exciting in this room. On the offensive line, so this is the important one with this team, given how this offensive line has performed for years. Did they get better? Yeah. Did they get better by much? Not really. Like, yes and no. They're still, compared to the rest of the NFL, pretty far behind, but they are not quite the historic disaster that they've been before. So what do they have position by position? Well, we're going to start at tackle, and actually I'm going to start with Riley Reeves so I can get him out of the way because he's a pretty easy one. He is a guy who will absolutely provide you starter-level tackle NFL play. Like, it's guaranteed. He's done it his whole career. He's not going to be somebody who bodies people or, who is like destroying people at the line of scrimmage or is eliminating the best passer. None of that shit. But he's going to do his job. He's going to do it decently. He's not going to get killed no matter what you ask him to do, which is absolutely useful. But then Jonah Williams. Let's talk about Jonah Williams. He is a first-round pick a couple of years ago, missed his whole rookie year with a knee injury, and somebody that was just one of these guys as a rookie who's just assumed he was going to be good in the NFL, one of these like safe picks where it's like, oh, no matter what you do, you're getting Pro Bowl level tackle play for 10 years, one of these types of guys, which is all nice in theory and everything. In practice, Jonah Williams has not been very good when he's been on the field for the Bengals, like at all. Frankly, that 57 ranking I have for him is pretty generous. And maybe I'm leaning too much into his reputation and or the hype surrounding him, because when he's on the field, listen, he is as much of a cause of a lot of the Bengals offensive line problems as these other guys who are notoriously bad at it. Now, he's not as bad as Bobby Hart or anything like that, but he gets beat in pass protection pretty frequently, actually, especially by good rushers. As a run blocker, I think mentally he's pretty good. He knows what he's doing, but like physically he's kind of weak. Like he doesn't bulldoze people ever, really. Even in double teams, it's not like he's a guy who's, pushing a defensive lineman 3 yards back and then able to move on to a linebacker. In theory, I suppose, he's supposed to be able to do all that stuff, but in practice it just doesn't really show up. Now, I will say, as far as that part goes, the Bengals do kind of do stupid stuff with what they ask their linemen to do in the run game, so it's not like he's being put in super advantageous positions, but from what I've seen, I don't really see it with him. He's kind of a low-level starter as far as I'm concerned. If he gets better going into this year, that's what he'll be. And I'm worried about that because they're going to make a lot of excuses for him for a long time. I can guarantee you that, whether he does get better or not. And that can lead to really bad situations for teams. That's how you get Matt Khalil starting for 4 years on the Vikings, things like that. So I'm just going to mention that with him. Depth-wise, Hakeem Adeniji as a rookie last year, I actually thought played some decent snaps. He's probably more of a guard than a tackle. I believe he's listed as a guard on their roster. But I actually think he did some okay things, granted, against subpar competition. So whatever. I don't want him anywhere near starting lineup as of now. But I think there's a chance he can play, which is more than I can say about most backup offensive linemen. Fred Johnson, maybe not so much. He was pretty bad whenever he played. Again, maybe more of a guard than a tackle. A guy, though, who as a tackle is going to get beaten in pass protection way more than you can really allow for your starter. So there's that. But, maybe he gets better. He was a young player when he's been doing these starts, but I'm not really encouraged. At guard, Quinton Spain. So Quinton Spain is awesome. And one of the stupidest decisions you saw the entirety of last year was when the Bills went out of their way to release him off their roster around week 4 or 6 or something like that. When he was basically at that point, he was the best healthy offensive lineman they had outside of Mitch Morse, and they just cut him. It was goofy, it was stupid, and predictably, the team that picked him up, which happened to be the Bengals, got a starting level player. Now, Quinton Spain's not elite or anything like that, but the dude can play. He's proved it a bunch of times. He, whether that's the Titans or on the Bills or this team, the dude can play. He's not going to make mistakes too much. He's going to be a decent run blocker. He's going to not fail you as a pass. He's a starting level guard, and it still bothers me that the Bills did that. If you can't tell, it was just such a stupid thing to do. But hey, Bengals got lucky. They got a starting level player for free. At the other spot, though, right now on their unofficial depth chart, they still have Michael Jordan starting. And this Michael Jordan is about as far away from good at your sport as his name would suggest can be. Literally, you go from, whatever the best or whatever basketball player of all time to the worst guard in the NFL, pretty much. He is really bad. Really, really, really bad. Especially 2 years ago, I don't know if I've ever seen a player get beaten as frequently as I've seen him get beaten. He will just lose his balance, fall flat on his face at the slightest defensive movement. And it's not just once out of every 20 plays it is. It was once every 3 plays. It was horrible. He made the situation untenable. And while I will say because he didn't play that much last year, when he did play last year, I guess he was a little bit better, but he was still doing a bunch of things out there that just speaks, what the hell, man? Get him off the field. And as of right now, I guess he's going to start for them. I can't imagine that lasts long, but yikes, that is a huge, huge, huge red flag. They do, however, have a backup in Xavier Su'a-Filo, who actually I think is kind of a starting level player. He's not very good, but he's not all that bad. And while he is limited athletically for sure, he is not going to suck in most of his snaps, which is way more than I can say about Michael Jordan. So that's just a wild thing. I don't know if that's actually going to happen or not, but I will mention just play Xavier Su'a-Filo a guard. Jesus Christ, you're going to be in such a better shape. Or Hakeem Adeniji, or even Fred. I don't care, just not Michael Jordan. Backup wise too, they do draft Jackson Carman in the second round. I should mention, he's a rookie, especially offensive lineman. Who knows how good he's going to be, but they do have him there too. At center. Another yikes here. So Trey Hopkins is not all that bad, I will say. And he maybe I look too harshly on because he was in the midst of these horrible offensive linemen for years. And as far as what his individual stuff, maybe I don't know if I've separated it well enough. Not that I like him as a player or anything like that. There are still very clear snaps on his film where he is the reason, along with whoever else is sucking at the moment, that the play fails for the offense. He's not good, shouldn't be starting the NFL probably. But he's not this garbage tier that a guy like Michael Jordan is. So, Trey Hopkins, he's just not going to add anything to your team. I guess he can do okay at the point of attack as a run blocker, but that's pretty much as nice as I'm going to be willing to talk about him. Billy Price is just horrible himself. He has played both guard and center and sucks equally bad at both. He was as a former first-round pick, which is about it, but to draft an interior lineman who busts this bad is wildly impressive, and it's not something that I can remember happening, frankly, besides him. Yeah, Billy Price is just really bad. He doesn't add anything to your offense. In fact, every play he's on the field, he is more likely than not to be the reason that your play does not go well. He can't function as a pass protector. Again, he has these just garbage balance. He'll just fall over all the time. And that's about the worst thing you can do as an offensive line because, even if you're losing, right, if you're still standing up and being in the way somehow, it allows the guys around you to react and to move and to do things. But if you're just on the ground, you're screwed. And Billy Price runs to that problem like every other play. They also bring in Lamont Guyard from Arizona. He's really bad himself. He's one of the absolute weakest players in the NFL. His play strength is like at 0, basically. In pass protection, he will get slammed 5 yards back off the ball all the time, especially by good interior guys. Now, I don't think he's going to make this roster or play or anything like that, but he's not good depth. And then they have late round rookie Trey Hill, who I remember he's a rookie, so whatever. But a lot of people when he got drafted thought he was like the worst player who got drafted in the entirety of the draft. So how does this offense function? Well, I've been very negative this whole time. I'm going to get a little bit more positive with how does everything fit together, mostly because there's a little bit of evidence last year with Joe Burrow as your starter of him doing okay at times. Granted, that was against some really bad defenses, mostly outside of the notable exception of the Colts. Which I can't even argue with that result. Actually, that's maybe the game more so than anything that makes me think there's something to Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense. But not something that is one game, and I'm not encouraged otherwise at all. So yeah, sorry. To get back to how does this offense function, right? So as a run game, they're going to be really bad. Their coaching is not good. Their scheme is not good. Their offensive line, who wins at the point of attack on this offensive line? Literally, your only chance is Quentin Spain. And he's not that type of player. Like, he's just okay. So, and I guess maybe if you're depending on Riley Reef to make yourself yardage in the run game, you're screwed. So that's not going to go well, which already limits, how consistent your offense can be. So when we talk about the passing game, and frankly, even there are going to be situations where this team can do very well because, again, Joe Burrow, I think there's definitely something to him, and they do have a lot of talent at the receiver position. The receivers they have, I'm worried about winning consistently. That's how you really win in the modern NFL. Look at the Bills last year is the best example I can think of. But also, a team like the Packers, Devontae Adams, the Vikings for a long time with their receivers. Like, how you win in the NFL is by consistently having guys that are getting open and making the quarterback's job easy, because the easier something is, the more likely you're going to be able to do it and do it repeatedly. These receivers are not those types of players. Again, they're all useful in their own ways. T. Higgins is kind of approaching that level, but he's not that type of guy. Tyler Boyd will be bad defenses for sure and be useful this year and have a bunch of statistics. But as far as carrying your offense to successful results, no, I don't even think there's a chance of it. And so you're depending on Jamar Chase being this wildly good player as a rookie, and even if he is as good as his former LSU teammate Justin Jefferson as a rookie, which is like, if you're hoping for better than that, I don't know what to tell you. Even if he's that good, while that does help them a ton and makes up for a lot of their other deficiencies, that's not enough for me to be confident about this team being successful offensively. That's just enough for me to be like, oh yeah, I guess they won't suck. And they still have to deal with Zach Taylor, head coach, which I haven't even mentioned yet, except for a little bit, who I am not a fan of at all. I think he does similar things to Cliff Kingsbury in terms of taking all the bad sides of the modern spread Rams 49ers offenses and not understanding what works about those, and then just saying like, oh, here's 40 wide receiver screens that go nowhere. Like, he's bad about that too. So that's not encouraging. Defensively, so there are players I do like more here. And let's talk about it. I'm going to start with DJ Reader. DJ Reader missed almost all last year, and that is a goddamn shame because that dude is really good at what he does. He is a fantastic elite nose tackle who is going to be a borderline dominant force up and down the line of scrimmage. He is not going to get pushed off the ball almost ever. As a pass rusher, he's actually relevant. He does things like with his hands that are very technique driven and very good. He has some explosiveness to him despite his size, some. And overall, he's just a super, super good player that this team missed a whole lot last year. They also bring in Larry Ogunjoby from the Browns. He is decent. He is one of the better explosive penetrating defensive tackles in the NFL. Now he's not elite at it, and he's pretty far off that. In fact, I think maybe he gets overrated sometimes, but he will absolutely have some flash plays where he is the reason that the offense is failing because he's getting into the backfield immediately and doing some good things. He's also the type of player that's a good barometer of when you're playing a bad offensive line because he will beat them and beat them fairly consistently. So that's a very nice, I like that signing for sure. He's a starting level player, not super elite, but I like him. Depth wise, you do have Mike Daniels, who is a real old veteran at this point and not somebody I'm a big fan of anymore. But that 29th, by the way, that's out of nose tackles, not out of defensive tackles, because that's where I would have assumed he would have played, although it's listed differently on their depth chart. He still does some nice things. He's super, as these veterans that last this long are, he's definitely a smart player. He's going to play really disciplined, do things right. His high-end impact is pretty much gone at this point, though. Khalil McKenzie did some okay things as a fat guy run defender in the middle of the line of scrimmage last year. I'm not super excited about him. Then you have, a rookie in Tyler Shelvin, a guy who's bounced around the NFL and not played, Josh Tupou. Freedom Akinmoladen played more like edge, which is why he's ranked 160th out of 104. He's ranked as an edge defender because that's where he played last year. Small sample size. He was not very good at all. They're moving him into the interior. Some guys that works wonders for, other guys not. I'm going to withhold judgment on that. I'm not exactly excited though. And Rennell Wren, whatever, he's been in the system for a while, never been an impactful player. At edge. So Sam Hubbard, I'm going to start with. He's a pretty good player. He is the type of guy who's going to be a good, strong edge defender who can play early downs very competently, and as a pass rusher is never going to be the reason that that your team is a good pass rush, but he can contribute because he tries really hard, and he's not like an idiot about it. Like he has some pass rushing moves. He can collapse the pocket a little bit. He's decent overall, starting level player on the lower end for sure, but reasonable. Trey Hendrickson got paid a lot more than that. Unfortunately for the Bengals, he is effectively the exact same player as Sam Hubbard, which, he is a starting level player, so it's not like the worst signing in the world. But listen, he had a bunch of sacks last year on the back of effectively David Onyemata. I mean, listen, he had 4 in the one game alone against the Buccaneers, and if you watch like literally each of the 4, they're almost exclusively because of how bad David Onyemata was beating Joe Haig on the interior. Don't believe me? Go watch it. It's very obviously what happens. He's a player. He's fine. He's competent as a run defender. Again, if he's like your number 2, number 3 edge rusher, source of pressure, he's going to do okay because he has technique. He can get to the quarterback a little bit, but he does not win super quickly almost ever. He's not an elite guy. He's not going to put up a large pressure rate. Like all that stuff has me worried because they paid him like the best edge defender. Well, no, but they paid him as like a legitimate number 1 pass rusher, which I will guarantee you is not the case. Again, though, he is a starting level player, so whatever. Depth wise, you have Joseph Asai, a guy who at some points was looked as a first rounder. I think got drafted in the 3rd round. We'll see about him. Khalid Kareem, that ranking is exceedingly harsh now that I'm looking at it. In fact, I believe that's wrong. I think he's ranked higher than that. He was a rookie last year who didn't play all that many snaps. He actually showed a little bit of strength as both a run defender and as a bull rusher on the edge. Not someone I'm excited about or think is ever going to be a high-end impact player, but I guess maybe he could be something. Amani Bledsoe, the actual bad one, he is a larger edge defender, another guy you could maybe argue for trying out a defensive tackle, but he played enough, like he actually played a reasonable amount of snaps last year and was pretty goddamn bad almost the whole time, especially as a run defender. He's just going to get knocked around despite his size. It gets ugly. Then you have 2 rookies, we'll see. At off-ball linebacker, another spot I'm not excited about. Now, I talked about how I'm not confident in my Joe Burrow evaluation. This is the other spot that comes up. I will say, despite how harsh it looks I am on Logan Wilson and Akeem Davis-Gaither, I am not totally sure that that's how I feel about them. They were in this weird spot last year as a defense where they were constantly rotating the 2 veterans, Josh Bynes and Jermaine Pratt, with the 2 rookies, Logan Wilson and Akeem Davis-Gaither. And especially in the second half of the year when those rookies were playing more, their offense was so bad because of the absence of Joe Burrow that it put them in a really tough spot. So I'm going to get all that stuff out of the way first. to say that there's a chance they're a lot better than this shows. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think this way about these players for a reason, but I will say that. So what do we have, or what do I think you have in Logan Wilson? He's a guy who I'm a little bit worried about as a full-time starting linebacker, because he did show against the run game, granted, again, he was in like a bad situation, but that he was going to, over a course of a game, have plays where he gets in the wrong position, where his lack of great athleticism does show up. He's not like a bad athlete, but he's not a particularly good one. And where he's just going to struggle to like make the right play every time, which can lead to big runs against your defense. Also, I think he did show enough to have me worried about him in pass coverage, because he didn't really show instincts as far as I'm concerned. I know he had a couple of splash plays, but if you look at him, a lot of those caused by, the opposing offense more so than himself, which is not like the end of the world, right? But not someone I'm particularly encouraged about. You also have Akeem Davis-Gaither. I did like him better than Logan Wilson, not by a whole lot, though. He did show the rangy athleticism that got him drafted fairly high. He did maybe show that he could do some things in coverage that are encouraging, as far as a guy who could keep up with, more mediocre tight ends, that type of thing. But it's not like he was ever out there like consistently making plays or doing things and I'm like, oh yeah, like that is going to impact the way the opposing offense has to play. So that I'm worried about. Now that would be nice if they're just guys who are like rookies or, just your third linebacker, but there are two guys who are projected to start on this team. And when you look around the rest of the linebacker rooms in the NFL, that's really scary. Then you do have Jermaine Pratt, the veteran of the room. He's not, I think he's like his 30 or something like that. He is okay for sure. Again, if he's your second or third linebacker, I'm a lot happier than the current situation. But, he isn't going to make a ton of mistakes. He's actually a reasonably smart player, especially run fitting between the tackles. He can do all that stuff. I'm not scared of him being on the field or anything like that. But again, the question is, what does he do? Right? Like positively to help your defense stop the opposing offense. And it's just not much. He's not like a playmaker. He's not a good pass defender. He's not somebody who's going to get in passing lanes or meaningfully cover players in man coverage. He's not somebody who's going to like read stuff quick, get behind the line of scrimmage and make tag, all that type of stuff. He blitzes okay. He's a decent athlete. He's not horrible, but I worry about the high end there. Then you have Marcus Bailey, another rookie last year. That ranking is based on a very tiny sample size. Keep that in mind. But again, not somebody I'm encouraged about really at all. So this position does worry me. At corner, so this one I get to be positive about. They have 4 like good corners who all should or could make an argument for starting most places around the NFL, if not should be. So Trey Wayne, Toby Wuzzier, Eli Apple, Darius Phillips. That's what I'm talking about. Start at the top. Trey Wayne's another guy who missed all last year. He has shown with the Vikings that he's not going to be able to cover number 1 receivers. That is a guarantee. But he's very fast. He's going to like competently and disciplinedly. He's going to competently and consistently play the assignments he is given with discipline and with intelligence and do that type of stuff. He can keep up with the guys athletically pretty well. He is really bad at the catch point, which is its own concern. That stuff is what he's like almost. So he's not Isaiah Oliver bad, who's the worst player I think ever. That's not quite true. Kendall Sheffield on his own team is actually worse, but irrelevant. Trey Wayne is not good at that type of stuff, and that does show up and hurt him at times. Toby Wuzzier got a bad rap because of how bad the collective Cowboys defense is. And while he's not great or anything, he does show the athleticism and ability to mirror even kind of good receivers at times. And that is encouraging. Now, he can make mental mistakes. He can get burned a little bit sometimes with guessing, that type of stuff. But overall, pretty reasonable player. Eli Apple, that dude's like good whenever he's on the field. Except for his rookie year with the Giants, I guess. Like, especially in the Saints, he played very well. Should have been starting for the Carolina Panthers last year. He had character stuff that's probably still, who knows with that type of thing. I'm not going to comment on it. But what I do know is if he plays on the field, he can actually do stuff pretty well. And it's going to be a guy with the athleticism and ability to keep up with kind of good receivers, which is valuable. And then Darius Phillips, too. Darius Phillips is like the best one as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if he's going to start on this team, but he definitely should. That guy's good. He's shown with the Bengals, again, in this tough situation that a lot of these guys were in last year, that like he can play. He's kind of a playmaker. The dude can keep up with most competent receivers. Again, he lacks the ceiling of being able to cover an actual like elite receiver, sure. But you can't always ask for that, and it's a depth piece. Hell yeah, dude. Darius Phillips is good. Past them, Tony Brown's one of the absolute worst corners of football. That guy's garbage. He almost single-handedly lost the Bengals a game sometime during their beginning part of last year when he actually started for some godforsaken reason. So not, depth past there, but 4 starting corners is more than the vast majority of teams have, so that's positive. And it's actually more than that because Mike Hilton is one of the elite slot corners in football. He's awesome. They're bringing him over from the Steelers in the offseason. He is a very, very good playmaker from the slot position as far as against the run and or against these like screens, short, goofy stuff that a lot of modern teams run. Like he is a fantastic weapon against that stuff. And as a down the field coverage player, he's just fine. He's not, going to eliminate guys or anything like that, but he's going to be competent. So a lot of good play in that room. And at safety, they have one of the best safety duos in the NFL too. Von Bell came over from the Saints last year. He himself was hurt for kind of a lot of last year, but when he's on the field, I'm very confident in him being a competent player. He makes plays in and around line of scrimmage. He's a very good box safety. He can actually not get burned in coverage, which is more than you can say for a lot of these stereotypical box safeties. He's pretty reasonable at it. He's a smart player. Big fan of Von Bell. Jesse Bates, breakout player last year. He's more than you could really ask for as far as a center fielding deep safety. Now, he's not quite as good as his reputation is at this point. I think that's kind of a bit out of control. He's not to the level of Justin Simmons or Marcus Williams or things like that, but he's fairly close. And he's a good player for sure. Depth wise here, Ricardo Allen was horribly bad for the Falcons the last couple of years. So really, really hope they're not expecting him to be on the field. And then you have Kayvon Frazier, Brandon Wilson, 2 special teams players. So that's not ideal, but when you look at this defense as a whole, frankly, they should be pretty damn good against most teams that don't have elite offenses, right? Because they have enough pass rush to bother guys, for sure. They're going to get really, really solid cornerback play, no matter what happens, pretty much. And secondary in general, actually, with how good their safeties are, and Mike Hilton. And while I'm worried about their linebackers, if there's a position you wanted me to be worried about, it's generally going to be linebacker. And I'm not these aren't players that I know suck necessarily, which, some team, it's not like they're throwing Jared Davis out of here, or they're like the Panthers last year with ancient Thomas Davis or something like that. It's just more guys who I'm not very sure or confident are going to be good, which is not the same conversation. That being said, I do think if they do play elite offenses, you're going to see a lot bigger issues because if you throw an offensive line that can handle their edge rushers, which does definitely exist in the NFL, then all of a sudden their lack of elite corner play is going to show up. And also they play teams that are going to attack their linebackers more, like 49ers or something like that. Then I get extra worried as well. So looking at their schedule, what are we talking about here? Well, offensively, as a reminder, this is going to get a little tough in the first half of the year, right? Because what you're hoping for, if you're the Bengals, is you're going to face teams that aren't going to kill your bad offensive line, so you allow your receivers to do what they do, and Joe Burrow can be a little bit more comfortable. When you look at this, they start with the Vikings, Bears, Steelers. Remember how Vikings defense is a whole lot different this year than it was before. The Bears still very good on the interior. The Steelers still amazing there. The Jags are getting better at that spot. That is the one that I'm a little bit more encouraged about, as well as the Lions. But then you catch the Packers and Kenny Clark. The Ravens are super good there. Jets have Quinn Williams, who's a monster. Browns, the defensive line is much improved and pretty good. First half of the year is tough. The second half of the year we'll see how injuries pile up in the NFL, but that is very concerning. However, defensively, most of these teams, they should be pretty good against. Outside of week 1 against the Vikings, which also I should mention, Joe Burrow isn't even necessarily going to be healthy and playing for that game because the Vikings do such a good job about attacking their linebackers, and whether or not they do end up being decent, I'm pretty confident about them not being in that specific case. But once you get past that, I mean, the Bears don't exactly run a scary offense, and actually, I like the Bengals defense in that matchup. Same thing with the Steelers, the way that they do their modern stuff. The Jags, are going to have a rookie quarterback. We'll see. Packers is a bad one, but then the Lions have a really bad off. Actually, I love the Bengals defense in that matchup. The Ravens offense, the way they function, they generally attack bad safeties, which the Bengals don't have. Like the Jets offense is potentially bad rookie quarterback. Like they are going to be in a lot of these games because the way their defense matches up. Now I am worried about their offense, but again, if Joe Burrow is a lot better than I'm giving him credit for, and or Jamar Chase is like a for real player, then frankly, you could be looking at a decent team, especially in the first half of the schedule. So that's the Bengals 2021. Not super excited. They don't have like crazy high ceiling, but there's some things, especially defensively, to be kind of excited about.